Okay, everybody, I'm excited about our guest today. My next guest is one who has some very real life experience that I am hoping is going to set loose new ideas that you have swirling around in your mind and heart, maybe bring something to your awareness, maybe give you a nudge to go pursue something new. My guest, her name is Anita, and she has an awesome story. Her whole life changed when she left the corporate world,
Oh
had some
yeah.
questions for God, and now she runs a business that she's going to tell us how did she get from one place to another, what is she up to, and how she's passionate about helping women make the same kinds of treks in their life to do some of the things that might just be in your heart right now. And I'm excited about Anita being here. She's a business owner and coach, and today we're going to talk about how to stay standing as you start a new business, or at least go through the idea stage to get there. So welcome to Still Standing. Anita, why don't you give us a little intro about who
Um,
you are and what you're up to, and what you're doing right now.
oh, thank you, Allie. I so appreciate you having me on, and I love what you're doing. I love connecting with other women who are here to be able to encourage and empower those of us that are just ladies of the faith and are doing different things than maybe our neighbors or our friends in and outside of church. And I love to be able to lock arms with ladies like you. It's so fun. So, as far as what I'm doing right now, I own a thriving consulting business and I help coach other women to do the same thing that I do. So, some of the metrics that I have noticed in my business are I just knew that when I left the corporate space that I had this specialized skill set, this knowledge, this experience. And God showed me a picture when I had retired early from the corporate space at age 43 to come home and homeschool my kids. He gave me this picture that I could take that experience and I could work at least half as much and make the same or twice as more. And do you know, today I work about a quarter of what I used to do in the corporate space and I make three times as much. And it's not so much about, for me, the real value in that and the win in that is the time and the money freedom that comes with being able to do what I do. Because I'm also a homeschooling mom. We're 15 years into our homeschooling journey. And so I would always wrestle with God and say, like, hey, I need time to be able to intentionally raise my kids and school my kids and do the things that we do as a household here.
That's amazing. And I talk to women all the time that feel those kinds of tensions every day and land all over the spectrum on how we've dealt with
Yeah.
them. So I think the reason that I sparked to you as someone I would love to talk to on the podcast is because I just see a lot of ideas, dreams, businesses, value sitting in women
Oh, yeah.
who really love the Lord, who just don't see a way through to get to the other side. And so you're somebody who seems like you know how to help people move through those stages to get somewhere with some of the things that God has planted inside of us. So before
Yeah.
we jump into a little bit more of what you're up to, I want to ask you the fun question that I try. Sometimes I miss it and I have to go back at the end and ask, but I actually remembered today. I like to ask everyone that comes on the podcast something, just share something that's keeping you standing these days. Like when you get out of bed, when you face your
Oh,
week
yeah.
or the day, what is something that gets you up, puts your feet on the ground in the right way, puts your head on straight? You wear glasses, it's like putting on the right pair of glasses so that you
Yeah.
can you can look at your world the right way. It can be anything, doesn't have to be a spiritual thing at all. I just like to know what's keeping you standing.
Yeah, so I'm a thinker. I'm a strategizer, I'm a thinker, I'm a problem solver. And so I often wake up either in the middle of the night or as soon as I wake up in the morning, like my mind is going, it's racing. And sometimes as like if we wear the hats of mom and wife and business owner or employee, whatever that looks like for you, if you homeschool your kids, whatever, if you're running kids, wherever, I feel like as women, oftentimes, this is the way that God shows me this picture. Is I often wake up and like at the top of a funnel, there's maybe like 100 things that I could or want to do in that day. And then I think, well, no, if I really look at my calendar, I can probably tackle like 20 of those. Because in my mind, I always think that I can actually accomplish that many things. And then God's
Totally.
like,
Me too.
oh, little buddy, you're so sweet that you think that. So, really, what I do that keeps me grounded is I walk and I pray. So I get up in the morning and I do my quiet time, and that kind of settles that down because it reorients myself on what I'm going to do. And when I get outside and I have a chance to just kind of like take a breath and really kind of settle myself down, I always ask the Holy Spirit, like, what are the one to maybe three things? Like, that's my stretch goal these days, 1 to 3 things that I have to get done today. And that just takes that gigantic funnel and sometimes that overwhelm and that worry that happens way up here. And it really just helps to like narrow it down to be like, okay, what's the one thing that I can do? Because don't we know, like sometimes as women, we want to do all these things. They're all great things, but it can get overwhelming and then we get stuck in that. And so instead, I've really been probably in the last maybe year-ish, I really have been intentional in taking that time to kind of slow down, take a breath, and just figure out, okay, what's the one thing that I can go after today?
Mm-hmm.
And it also boosts my confidence along the way because I don't know, a lot of us, and it could be anything, by the way. Like the one thing, it could be business related, homeschooling related. It could be that day, like I make my bed, right? I mean, it could be, it doesn't really matter what the one thing is. It's just settling it down so that I can actually accomplish that one thing and go out or move forward on that one thing. And that has really helped to take away a lot of the like the worry and the anxiety that sometimes I just kind of naturally have.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, that's so common because my experience with many women, especially women that are working and having families, maybe they're, maybe they have a side hustle, maybe they're homeschooling, maybe they're a corporate mom, whatever. They're the glue. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what, it doesn't matter all the pieces. I think a common story with many women is that they're the invisible glue in all the cracks of a lot of other people's lives. And so I
Yeah.
love that practice. And you're probably my third or fourth guest that has said they go outside in the morning, and they all describe it a little bit differently. And it's inspired me. I think I'm going to, sometimes I try things that my guests say when they inspire me, but you're the tipping point for me. I think I'm going to try for the next couple weeks to get up and actually go outside.
Yeah.
Because they've each of my guests that's mentioned that has a different reason for it, but it seems to have a grounding influence. So
I'll tell you what,
I'm
Allie,
I'm
we
on
moved
board. I'm
from,
going to try it.
I'll tell you, we're from Southern California, from San Clemente, a beach town in Southern
Mhm.
California, and we moved to Texas about 5 years ago. It's much more challenging when it's really hot outside to get out and do that. But even in the heat, even in that, it's so refreshing to just kind of like get out and shake off the junk and then get going on that day. The other thing that helps me do that I was thinking about while you were sharing with other women, it helps me to kind of like crowd out the comparison that I can
Mm.
and sometimes we as women, like we can compare ourselves like, oh my gosh, my life doesn't look like Allie's or my life doesn't look like Anita. None of that really matters, right? It's being able to kind of center in on like, but God, what are you calling me to do today? And then the rest of that other stuff just really kind of melts away. More so, I notice than when I don't practice being able to get outside. Now, to be fair, like I'm not able to do it every single day, but it is a regular practice that I engage
Mhm.
in. And it's really, it changes my head and my heart, and that's the most important thing.
I have a slightly different but very similar thing that I do with God at the beginning of the day. I can't swear that I do this every morning, but I do this most mornings.
Yeah.
I'll look at my day with the Lord and I'll ask him, where is my energy high point? Like, what do I
Mm.
need to conserve other things around? Like, I need to make sure that I am up for this today. And that
Wow.
could be something with my children. It could be engaging with my husband. It's not always work related, but sometimes it is. And that helps me to go like, okay, if that is the thing I need to maintain energy for, and it's at 9 p.m. tonight, well, that can change some things during my day. So I I notice that we tend to give energy to the first things that happen chronologically. And so
Yeah.
I will often ask God, like, what's the most important thing that I go into with a clear mind and a full heart today? And I want to make sure that I conserve enough energy for that thing because it's not always
I
at
love
9
that.
a.m., right?
Yeah. I
So,
totally love that, especially when you talk about something that might happen at 9 p.m.
right.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
it could be a
awesome.
long
I'm
time
gonna
from
try
now.
that.
It could be a
I'm gonna
long
take a
time
note
from
and
now.
try that. That's so good.
Sometimes that even makes me take a shower at a certain time of the day. You just never know what it's going to make a difference for. So, well, give us a little bit of your story. I don't know if you know, you probably don't know this about me. Why would you? But I have also a story about leaving a corporate job. And I would love to know, how do you view now, looking back on that story, because it helps us to see what God is doing in our lives when we hear how he's done something in other people's. How, can you walk us through, looking back, what was God actually doing when he brought you out of the corporate world and helped you transition into something new? Like, how did he move you? What was
Yeah.
going on? What it sounds like homeschooling was a part of that decision, but then there was a lot else that was coming.
Oh,
And
sure.
so, just take us through, as you look back on that decision, what was stirring in you and how did God kind of move you from one place to another?
Yeah, so I'll give you kind of the condensed journey. So my husband and I started having kids, and I think probably about the time that my daughter, I was either pregnant with her or she had just been born, and I kind of went to my husband and said, I kind of have a heart to homeschool. Like, how do you feel about that? And I have an older stepson who's been mainstream school all the way, and so Vince was kind of like, I don't know, okay, I mean, it
I'm
wasn't
like,
really at a point where he
knock
could make that
yourself
decision.
out. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, and I was full blown, like my schedule in the corporate world was very, very busy. But as our daughter started to grow and kind of stumbled across the opportunity to homeschool, we started out in like a private school co-op in Southern California where the kids could go to school a couple of days a week and we could homeschool the other days of the week. And so we started that. And when I guess for me, I thought homeschooling, oh my gosh. But when your kids are in like junior K, the demand for you at home is not that bad, right? But as the years went on and we had more children and the demands at school got to be bigger, like there was always this stirring in my heart. Even before I had kids, Allie, I remember I traveled a lot for work and I remember getting on planes and talking to young moms and with like tears in their eyes because they would be leaving their toddlers at home
Yeah.
to go off and work all week long. And it totally touched me and my heart. And I was like, I don't know if I could do that or not. So that was always kind of stirring in the background. Then there was a couple of big markers for me in particular. So I was a software executive. I had reached like a level of success where I had like title, accolades, the money coming in, all those things. But I distinctly remember, I can remember it like it was just a second ago. I remember getting to the top of like climbing the corporate ladder and feeling like I was choked out. And I remember looking around thinking, I am not happy. Like I thought all these things would make me happy. Like going after the stuff that I was told would be the good things in my life. Like I was really genuinely not happy. I wasn't happy in my marriage. I wasn't happy in my work life. I wasn't happy at home. I wasn't happy with a lot of things, not necessarily because things weren't going well from the exterior, but like internally, I was super unhappy. So I
Do
kind of
you
started on this journey.
Let me ask you a question about that realization. Do you think now that was a wake up from God in some way? You believe he was stirring you to notice that, I guess would be the language I would use. Because sometimes you don't know at the time. You just know, I feel a certain way. I keep thinking about this certain thing, but were you aware at the time? And do you now think that was, in fact, God?
It was totally God for sure. I don't know that I could necessarily put it in that language right then. I knew that I had a deep desire to be at home with my kids and raise my own kids intentionally. So,
Yeah.
right. So you're working full time. Like there was a season for our household where I'm working way more than 40 hours a week. My husband's working full time. we have nannies helping us with the kids. Like, right, there's all these pieces. And if one little piece fell out of the spoke, then, right, one spoke fell out of the wheel, then, that day would kind of roll down and, and crumble. But I do remember having such a deep desire to be at home with the kids. And then kind of, for me, like the journey it was kind of a long journey. Now I preface that when ladies have told me, oh my gosh, I've been waiting on the Lord for 20 years to have breakthrough or something like that. Like those statements, honestly, they would drive me nuts. They would really, frankly, they would kind of piss me off because I'd be like, I don't want to have to wait that long. But here's the thing that was kind of cool. In hindsight, I could see how God was unraveling all this nonsense I had in my mind, Allie, and it staying in the space in the corporate world for 8 years is what it took from the time I wanted to leave to the time that I actually left. I watched God unwind all this nonsense. And so then when I retired early, he showed me this picture like, Anita, I needed you to be ready. Because here's the thing, in the corporate space, what I was taught in corporate America is that in order to be successful, in order to go toe to toe, so I came from the tech industry, so many of my counterparts were male. In order to go toe to toe with all my male counterparts, either compete with them or work alongside them or be as successful as them, I had to like strip off everything about the woman that God made me to be and kind of take on more of like just, I don't know, just male persona, if you will, not in a weird like masculine way or anything like that. But when I started recognizing that and God started speaking into that, like I made you to be a powerful woman inside corporate America. And what does that look like for you? Because sometimes in corporate space, we have most of the time when you see a super successful woman in corporate America, she is rarely described as like kind and loving and caring, right? She usually has pretty negative connotations that come with her. And so that's why I said it's always this picture of like this unwinding of this nonsense that I had in my mind, and my identity was totally jacked up. It wasn't about what God had taught, had what he spoke over me as a daughter of the Most High King. And so for me, that process just took time. It wasn't, here's what I say. It wasn't that I was necessarily waiting on God, but it was more like he was waiting on me to come to these realizations. Like, right, I'm a leader all day long at work. And then I'd come home and I'd talk to my husband and he'd be like, who's the leader in this household, honey? Like, and we would wrestle because I was used to leading teams all day long, and I'd come home and it was hard. It was hard for us to learn. It was hard for me to learn how to be a good partner with him. And there's a lot more to that story, but I'll pause right there.
It's funny. I resonate with a lot of what you're saying from my own corporate experience in the past. And I knew and liked several women that were significantly above me in the company, but I could not resonate with their personal lives.
No.
Like I respected much about them at work, and I enjoyed their company and their personalities and all the pieces. But when I would look at their lives in total, I would think to myself, much like you did, because this was pre-children for me. I would think to myself, but, like two of them didn't have children. Two of them had like such significant childcare that they were really not primarily parenting. That's how I would put it. Like, not that they weren't good mothers, they were just not there, because they had, there was global travel expectations and they needed help. They needed help to do that. And so, anyway, I had some of those bells ringing, and I too thought later, not at the time, but later, that God was trying to cause me to notice some things that he was going to sort of put in place later on. And I think a lot of times we blow by those little nudges from God that he's at work, and we either squash them or we ignore them or we misunderstand them, because there was a part of me at the time that I could easily have gone the direction of, no, I am going to make this work. Like, I will be the one that makes this work, And I think that when, especially when there's some strength in leadership, it's not unusual to try to take that route. But boy, Um, you know, I do often think that God stirs things in us a long time before he he puts us through a change point.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so you come through, a lot of it has to do with these stirrings that um, you want to have particular capacities at home that are just incompatible. It's not that you weren't good at your job, didn't like it, had gotten
No.
tired of it. You just knew they couldn't both exist in the
Yeah.
same.
And the other thing is my husband and I were constantly having the conversation of, hey, you can't quit. You make too much money. You're the
Yeah.
primary breadwinner. What are we going to
Right.
do? How are you going to,
Yeah.
you have this, because I would say, hey, I really kind of have a heart's desire to do these things. And he'd be like, that's amazing. But it's kind of a, not really telling me no, but telling me no all at the same time. And
Well,
it
yeah,
was,
there's a practical reality. And I
oh
remember
yeah,
when I left work altogether, I had my own stepping stone process, but I did have an era where I wasn't working at all. Um, I left corporate America for ministry, and then I left ministry to stay home. And I was like, God, I don't know what you're doing with my life anymore. Like I thought I left corporate America to go into ministry, and then I left ministry, and now there's nothing. And that was the moment where we really had to rethink how our home worked, because I was shocked to learn how much pressure that put on my husband.
oh yeah.
That he felt a sense of pressure that he wasn't expecting to feel.
Mm,
And so we had to go through a lot there. So when you come through this and you make these decisions, how did you get into actually creating your own business? Take me through, like, you're at home, you've gone home for family reasons, but you're a talented, high capacity, intelligent woman with actual skills to bless people.
right.
And did you think that God was going to bring you back around to something? How did that change occur? How did you go from homeschooling kids and wanting to be present at home back into starting your own business? Like, tell us what was going on inside you. What were you thinking? Because this is the part where I see a lot of women sit on
Yeah.
these ideas and dreams that are stirring because they can't figure out how to get from here to there.
Right.
So how
Right.
did you do that? Tell us how you did it.
Okay. So here's a couple of foundation pieces. Number one, financially, I felt like we were really secure at the time that I took retirement from the tech space. I felt like we were financially secure to be able to do that. And I had
Okay.
projected some of that stuff out. And so we would have that kind of conversation. By that time, too, my husband was traveling full time. And then it was like, well, who's going to raise our kids if you're gone all the time? And there was a shift going on in my space. And so it was like, I either shift back to working, to traveling full time or whatever. So, right. So we have this kind of like this epiphany in the midst of like several blowups and all sorts of stuff. There was a lot going on there, but financially what we found, like, we felt like we had what we needed to make that first step for me to just retire full time. And I was so committed to homeschooling at that point. Like, our daughter was in fourth grade and our youngest son was in kindergarten when I retired to come home and homeschool full time. And honestly, like, God provided for us in those years because the numbers on paper in some ways did not balance out. They didn't make a lot of sense. We had done, like Dave Ramsey and FPU for a lot of years. So we knew our numbers. We knew how to live on what we needed and all that kind of stuff. Like, we were super equipped to have those conversations and make adjustments when income adjusted. So that was another foundational piece, is we had the skills already to adjust our finances. We didn't live extravagantly, but we had beautiful home and, great things around us all the time. And then I went through a long season of just homeschooling kids, and my heart was so happy for many, many years. I kind of would take a little bit of like tip a little tiny pinky toe in trying to go back to work a little bit here and there, but it never really made financial sense, because the thing is like, if you're trying to be a mom and do a part-time job, the reality is sometimes some of those jobs are, I don't know, maybe I'll just make up some numbers. Like, I might make $20 an hour, then I got to pay my nanny $20 an hour, and that is a complete wash. The other thing is, my husband was traveling full time by that point. So he was gone every Monday and back every Thursday, every week, all year long until from January to Thanksgiving. And so we would sit down and have those conversations. And I'd like scratch my head going, babe, where's our marriage going to be if you're gone all week long and I just work on the weekends? Like, where's this thing going to be? Because I feel like we were going to be ships passing in the night. And we just really, we've always known this. We knew God called us to homeschool and we were going to be obedient to that no matter what. And with that
Okay,
foundational,
I just wanted to interrupt you for a second
yeah,
because you've said two interesting things that I don't want people to miss. One of them
okay,
is, and they're both very foundational.
yeah,
One is you were financially able, you were financially free because of the foundational way that you were choosing to live with your money. So
yeah,
that's a big deal because I
it
wish
is.
we had 2 hours to talk because I have a whole story about being free with your money means you're not beholden to certain people and things. And
Yes,
so that is incredibly important if you want the option to follow God into some new stuff. So you were financially capable of at least considering it, right? There might have been
yes.
some missing pieces and some things you needed to figure out, but there was a fundamental freedom that you had cultivated with your finances.
Absolutely. And I think it takes wisdom to step into that piece, because
Mhm.
we see a lot of people who will say, well, God just called me to something. I'm not knocking that God's not calling, but I also know that He always wants us to walk in wisdom.
Right.
And so sometimes we see people do this all the time, right? They'll step into something where they're not really ready for it and it kind of falls apart. Now, even
Yep.
in our story, like God provided for us in that 10-year stretch from the plan to the unplanned all the way to the miraculous. And
Yep.
it was hard. For me, being somebody who has like a really core value of being a good steward with money and with people that God give me, like it was radically hard for me to do that week after week after week and watch our budget so closely. But the
The
other
other
thing that you
piece,
wanted to talk about was probably like we were called and we wanted to be obedient to that.
yes. You had one thing in place, and this is so key as I look back, and I would not have had the language for it at the time, but I'm so glad to hear it in your story too. It even affirms it in me as like a way that God moves us. If you know one clear thing that you're to be obedient toward,
Yeah.
and you pursue that, there tends to be other things that come as a result of that obedience. It puts foundational elements of wherever God is taking you in lots of other ways into place. And I have a similar thing in my story about how God laid foundations. Like, what are your non negotiables? That's how
Mm-hmm.
I would put it. Like, based on what you think God is calling you to do, what are your non negotiables? And those tend to force other things into alignment. And for me and for you, I would say that is whatever the thing that God has told you to be obedient in doing.
Yeah.
But I even think outside of a faith context, if you
Oh
can
yeah.
name a non-negotiable priority,
Totally.
everything under that will be in better order. And
Yeah.
so for me, the biggest thing is, what do I know God wants me to be obedient toward? And for you, that wasn't primarily a work thing. It was primarily homeschooling your children, but that ended up setting you up for some other context and blessing and opportunity
Yeah.
as you became obedient to that, which
Yeah.
is so key. It's so key because sometimes we want to fill in the gaps. We want to think our way to the whole puzzle. And God's like, "Hey, could you just be obedient in doing this?
Yeah.
Could you just please move in that direction?"
Yeah.
And some other things line up as a result of that obedience. And that's a really tough concept for us thinkers. I'll just put my hat in the ring with you on this because I can see all the pieces on the table and I want to go, well, how do I put these all together, Lord? And
Yeah.
sometimes he's like, how about you just homeschool your kid?
Right.
You know, and to me at times that simple or first act of obedience sounds too disconnected from some of the other pieces, but it never is.
Yeah.
It never is.
It
And
can
I think,
also, for
go
some,
ahead.
it can also sound too small.
Hmm.
It can all, right? God, if I only just do this one thing. What I actually loved about that is it gave us, it was such a fun conversation starter for like believers and non-believers, especially. And they're like, why do you homeschool? With this face, this look on their face. And we'd be like, because this is just where God's called us to, and we want to be obedient to that. And they'd be like, huh? And we'd start having a conversation. Hey, this is what we believe. This is what we're doing. And it wasn't like a weird religious thing, because I'm not about religion. It's about, no, God calls us to have a relationship with the people that he's put in under our care. And so this is what relationship looks like for us.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
Well,
yeah,
these
there
are
was, it was so good.
these are awesome, like foundational things to sometimes you and I talk to people, especially women who are the glue, it can be very hard when you know that the things God is stirring in you are going to move other people's pieces around. I
Yeah.
hated the idea that even though my husband agreed with me at the time that God was calling me to leave work entirely and come stay home, we had already stepped down big corporate salary to a ministry salary, and then 2 years later to none. And
Yeah.
as I look back, I think, oh, there was so many things. He was being very gracious to us
Oh,
in
sure.
that stepping stone process. It
Yeah.
was, and then during the era where I was at home, really set in place some things that I could never have seen
Mm.
that still serve me today after I've been back to school, after I went back to ministry, after, that were really set in place during a time that I would have said, well, God just told me to stay home.
Hmm.
And that's about all I knew. And
Yeah.
I had no idea what else he was going to move and shift and put in order during that time.
Yeah.
And those are things that our obedience wins us. Like he's not going to tell you, right? You're going to need
Well,
to be obedient in order to have the fruit of that obedience. It's
right.
not like he's not going to put all the pieces together on the front end.
Well, and I think you just mentioned something really interesting, Allie. I think that God invites us an awful lot more than he tells us. He lays some things out and says, if you'll step into this, Anita, I'll do some amazing things. It's
Mhm.
not like it's going to be easy or any of that. Like that's total nonsense. It's never modeled in scripture for us or anything like that. But so many times where I think it's more of an invitation than it is a telling, right? God's a good God and he's a good dad and
Yeah.
he's gracious and loving and caring. And his character is, I invite you to do these things with me so that you can lean on me, so that you can find your strength in me, so that you can reflect the glory that is in you that comes from me. Like, I think it's actually more of that that's going on than necessarily, because here's the thing, the reason that I pointed out that way is so many times when we're outside of the faith, sometimes we can view God as like this mad dad who's wrathful and angry and all these kinds of things. And when I tell my kids to do something, it's likely because they haven't listened to me one or two times, and now the choice is gone, and now they have to do it, right? And
Right.
I just feel like God, this is just the journey that I have been on, where He's showing me through the Word and through experience that it's more of a loving invitation than anything else, that like you have to go here, you have to move there, and all these kinds of things. So I just throw that out for people to chew on. You can validate it and just double check and see what God says to you. But
Yeah,
that I just,
I that is full of graciousness, the idea that we're invited because um there have been moments, I would say moments in my own story where it's felt like one or the other. Um
yeah,
And there are times in my life where I have felt, and I guess I feel when I'm out of alignment with him, and
Hmm.
I don't like that.
Yeah.
I usually will seek to move because I desire that sense of alignment with him.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm not I I think it could be either, but I love the idea that typically how he opens up new possibilities is through invitation.
Sure. Sure.
That just
Well,
sounds much more consistent with his character.
yeah. Let's be clear. It's not that God can't tell us what to do. I just
Yeah.
wonder sometimes if it's a little bit more of an invitation than a directive,
Yeah.
which, yeah, we can talk about that more on another episode. There's a lot there.
Sure, of
Yeah.
course. And okay, so tell us, as you start, so you start this consulting business at some point
Yeah.
on the side, but ironically, it's to help women do the very thing that you've done.
Yeah.
And so tell us why you have such a heart for women, and like what do you do if a woman comes to you and they say, I have this thing in my heart. I
Yeah.
don't know how to get from here to there. Do you have like a process you take them through? Is it more of an individual thing that you do? What's the first step? Like, how would you tell somebody listening, something stirring in them in an idea phase? Maybe it's a business, maybe it's a life direction shift. What do you tell your clients to do? Let us in on your first secret.
Yeah, so I do a couple of things. I authored a book earlier this year that's called a 6-step blueprint to be able to build a profitable consulting business because I just am so keen on helping other women do some of the same things that I've done, which is kind of laughable to me because before Jesus, like to be candid about it, women were not my sweet spot at all. So I think it's a little bit funny that God's like, hey, by the way, here's like, I'm going to stir your heart for these ladies. But what I do know is when you've gotten, so remember, I came from this spot of like feeling choked out, like not necessarily having my marriage be the way that I wanted, the intentionality in raising my kids, and like knowing that I had these skills, but wanting to reapply them in different ways. I tried a bunch of different things, but here was the kicker. Around 5 years ago, I really had a stirring. So we had moved from San Clemente, California, down to the Austin, Texas area. And as the kids got older and my demands for me to school the kids got less and less over the years, I was kind of looking around like, okay, my house is clean, the kids are taken care of. Like, now what? Like, I'm a doer. I just love doing stuff, right? So I dabbled in a couple of things. And then I went to my husband one time and he was like, I don't know what your deal, I don't know what you want to do, honey, but just go after it because I can see that you're hungry for something else. So I essentially took the skills that I had and I started really reimagining and planning them in a different way and applying those different way. And that led me over a little process of time to be able to build a consulting business where I can help clients with my specialized knowledge. But it also, what I noticed is I was talking to women about the very same things. Like I was coaching all the way through. I've been coaching and teaching for lots of years, whether I called myself that or not. And so the process that I love to take women through, it usually looks like this. It's number one is identifying. So again, narrowing down that funnel to say, hey, I know that you're probably good at like 300 things, but what's the one thing that you really like, really, really makes your heart sing? Okay, so then we identify that. Then, as part of the 6-step process, and by the way, we do that in a small group mastermind. It's so powerful and so impactful. I know for me, having been involved in other coaching masterminds for my business, when we get around people who are like minded, who are going to use godly wisdom, who are going to speak life into one another, we just can accelerate in ways that we couldn't necessarily do on our own. So I tried that. I struggled on my own for a while and then realized this is dumb. I need to like partner with some people and get some help along the way. So that's essentially what we do is I walk ladies through a 6-step process that goes from refining the specialized knowledge and then all the way through how do we market ourselves? How do we get the word out there? How do we for ladies, personally, I believe that whether you're in a paid for business or a nonprofit business, it's all ministry. Like that's what I see modeled. Personally, that's what I see modeled in scripture. Wherever I go, I carry the mantle of Christ. So I'm in ministry wherever I go. It doesn't matter. And so if a woman is working full time and trying to figure out, like, Anita, how do I start this thing on the side? We actually have a document that I've written up that helps them to identify, okay, this is where you're going to, in 15 hours a week or less, here's where you're going to identify and block your time out so you can start it. Because sometimes, don't we know, like, we've reached this level of success and we don't want to throw away all of that to go into some form of like full-time ministry and then all of a sudden lose everything, or all of a sudden, like, I feel like when God's given us the abundance, he wants us to use it in good ways, and not, sometimes he wants us to give it away, but sometimes not, right? And so we walk through the process of being able to identify the specialized knowledge, turn that into consulting business, and then follow a model like what I did, where you can work, half or a quarter of what you used to. I used to work an 80-hour work week. There's no way, Allie, in the world that I would be able to care for my family and have an intentional relationship with my husband if I'm dedicating myself to somebody else and something else for 80 hours a week. I think it's even really hard to do that when you're working 40 or 50 hours a week, because that's a lot of time. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of time dedicated to something or someone else. And then what do you have left over? Like nothing. So we really tackle a lot of the practical and tactical elements of growing a business, but we also tackle a lot of the hard stuff, because what I do know is I have a unique ability to be able to, where somebody is stuck on their path and they can't see a step forward, the Holy Spirit shows me with wisdom a different angle to come and approach the challenge that they have in front of them. And then once we get, and then actually all the steps that takes to go from the big idea all the way back. And I love doing that with women. Like that is my most exciting thing to do in the world, is let's figure this out and let's map out a plan. Like the plans are so clear to me. I can rattle it off on the top of my head in just minutes. And it's a gift that God has given me to be able to see that and help others be able to see and totally have breakthrough because of that. So that they're not, being choked. Like, if you're already working a lot, who wants to add more to their plate? Life's busy, right? Yep. We use these phrases like crazy busy. Like I always think, if my grandma ever heard me say crazy busy, she passed away in her mid-90s. She'd be like, honey, those words don't go together. Crazy and busy, like they're not meant to be strung together, and yet we use them all the time. Mm-hmm. And so instead of having life be busier, what if we were able to find a group of women that could come alongside of us and shoulder to shoulder say, I'll help you take that next step. Whatever that looks like, I'll help you take the one next step that gets you on the path to be able to build this business of your dreams. Because how wonderful is it when we're like working in that sweet spot and our hearts are full and we get to be able to have the time and the money and the energy to do all the other fun things that God has called us to do, to serve and to explore, new ideas that he has for us and meet new people. Like, I love that part of it. I think there's so much freedom in that.
There totally is. And I'm just listening to you thinking, I don't know a woman out there that would not take more freedom and more heartfelt work in front of her. I think most of the women that I know feel the tension of those choices all the time. Yeah. And I love that you're somebody who's opening up the possibility alongside the practical realities, because I'm like, I don't know, on the scale of possibilities versus practicalities, there's some tension there. It's not necessarily a scale, but it's definitely a tension. And it sounds to me like you bring together a really great combo of like possibility and practicality, because there are some realities to wherever you're starting, whatever that looks like. So, some of us have a list of 70 things or 7, but there's a reality to where you begin. And yet there's more freedom than I think we're taking. for our
Yeah.
lives. One of the things that I love to talk about with women is this idea that we really are free to co-create our life with God. This is not
Absolutely.
a formula we're looking for. It's not a puzzle we're trying to find exactly the right piece. It's a freedom to co-create. And I think sometimes freedom without help through can be very paralyzing. That it's very unhelpful sometimes to say, well, just dream up all your new possibilities. It's no, you actually need someone to say, here's how you step from here to there. And that's one of the reasons why I was interested in what you do and your story, because um there's a lot of people that can inspire possibility in people. There's not as many that can take that into, here's a practical way to start moving against that new possibility
Yeah.
while holding it. I mean,
Right.
so there's other people who are like, you know what, that's not going to work, and here's the 62 reasons why not.
Right.
That's equally unhelpful. And so I love
Yeah.
the combo of possibility and practical steps. Tell
And
me, on your days where you have felt in the dark,
mm,
what are you doing, God? I'm not sure how to follow you, God. I'm maybe feeling a little hopeless, God. Are you really doing something? Do you really see where I am, Lord? What have those days, what has cleared the clouds for you on those days? Like, how have you moved through those times where you've gone, I just can't see you. I don't know what to do now.
yeah. So it's probably a two-step process for me. One is I'm like the big cheerleader for my household, right? And so then because I've modeled that for my kids and my husband, then they always do that for me. So when I'm down, I try to take some time away from just work and take a breath and just get some perspective. But then I also go to my people, and then they're able to say like, "Mom, you're amazing," and right, we're able to have a conversation. The other piece of that is, and part of the story that kind of skyrocketed up and really intensified some of the success that I have right now is a direct result of a big upset we had last year. So in our household last year, we had like a marriage upset, a medical crisis, and then a job loss, all in within about a 6 to 8 week window. And my husband ended up in the hospital in an emergency situation. And I got to tell you, like that event, it changed us,
Yeah.
right? It changed my perspective on what's really important and who's really here and who's doing this with me. And it reset a lot of things in me and in our marriage and in our household to be able to really genuinely understand and appreciate how do we don't necessarily always know how much time we're going to have. And so it shifted a lot of things in me, and it shifted a lot of things in Vince and I as a married couple, because that was right before Easter last year, and by my birthday, which is at the end of May, I was looking at him and saying, we kind of had a moment outside. We were standing out back by the pool, and it was like, hey, there was a possibility that you might not actually be here right now. And as hard as that is, I actually, now where he's healthy and recovering and going through that process, it's totally changed me for the rest of my life to be able to have that perspective of seeing like, wow, we used to always joke and say, like, I'll tell people all the time, look, I've already made a deal with God. I'm going to live to 100. I'm barely at the halfway point as it is right now. And while we were in the hospital, I looked at Vince and I was like, don't you remember? Like, you already promised me another 40-ish years. Like, come on already. And he was like, oh, okay. And we had a moment in the midst of crisis and looked at one another. And it was one of those things where it was like, okay, we're going to figure this out. Like, by God's grace, we're going to move away from medical emergency and crisis situation and get you healthy again. And that's been a whole new journey for us. It's been very different for our household to be able to walk through those things and have that perspective. But it's also helped to keep all the rest of the work stuff in a different perspective and
Yeah.
realize, like, I always had a good sense. I don't know why. Like, God gave me this picture when my kids were tiny. Even before we started homeschooling, it was like this picture of everybody's going to either live in all these silos, right? Where I was traveling, they were at private school, Vince was traveling, and all this kind of stuff. And I'd be like, God, where's our life in that? Like, where's our life together in that? And so I feel so incredibly grateful that we've had the opportunity to homeschool for, we're on our 15th year running. But in the midst of that, I also say the same thing. Like, I just am grateful that we have this time. I have this interesting perspective that I got from my grandma a long time ago that, like, no matter what age you are, you're still young if you're still here, if you still have breath in your lungs. And so what are we going to do? And it's really helped to kind of set that foundation for where I used to really have a lot of ups and downs and dark moments that would take me days to recover from because I'd be so overwhelmed about what to do in the business and everything was struggling and nothing was working. Like, that's the other side, right? We talk about success, and in the online space, everybody talks about like this hockey stick of success where, I don't know, millionaire overnight or some nonsense or something like that. And it's not that revenue wise, those events can't happen. What we fail to see, though, is like the backstory of what it took to take all those steps up to the point of what looks like immediate overnight success. And
Yeah.
I love how, when I'm able to tell that part of the story, to kind of unfold and unpack the struggle, because like I host a podcast that's called The Messy Middle, One Mom's Journey to Build a Profitable Business. And I just feel like instead of just showing um, like the starting point where you don't have anything going yet and the success point, like, what about all the stuff that happens in the center? Like, that's the messy middle. It's figuring some of this stuff out. It's talking to people and working out your offer and understanding what you're good at and going out and networking. Like, it's all of those things, but like the wins and the losses that we can celebrate as women in that. And that I'm just basically journaling my journey, because I feel like that's where the transparent transformation actually happens. And I love that. Like, I just am so, it's just like a non-negotiable for me anymore to just be authentic about like the real, like, life's amazing. And it's also, if I may say, it's also kind of shitty sometimes. Sorry if that offends anybody, but it just really is. Sometimes it really is. And so walking through that process and talking through that process, I think is incredibly powerful. Now, I get it. It's not for everybody, but that's okay, because I'm not called to serve everybody. I'm called to serve a slice of women where we can champion one another and love on each other and support each other and hold each other accountable, to be able to just take the one next step that God's calling each of us to do, and do that with wisdom.
I was looking at the verse behind you as we're talking, thinking, oh my gosh, that's got to be like your life verse. And do you want to tell us what that sign says? And is it a signpost for you, quite literally? I mean, is this the thing that you have in your mind a lot and that you want to be for other women? Just a reminder of this, because it seems to fit
Yes,
a lot
yeah,
of
it
what
is.
you're
It's,
saying.
yeah, it's be strong and courageous and don't be afraid or discouraged, right? And God will be with us, right, all the time. I'm paraphrasing, but
Yep.
right, I think of how many times, like, as women, how many times we've been overcomers, how many times we've been warriors, how many times have we been like disruptors of different things where we kind of shake things up and do something very different. Like, those are kind of like my people, the ones that
Yeah.
are willing to be strong and courageous in the midst of everybody else telling you, don't do that, that's a dumb idea, you
Yep.
can't. All those are just even like like, my people are not the people that are going to complain and not going to do anything. Like, I just don't have bandwidth for that at all anymore in life, really, Allie. I want to be able to connect with women, and that's what we do. We have both the mastermind, but also a membership community where we're we're really genuinely, it's full of women who want to champion other women. Because don't we know, like, not everybody wants to do that,
Right.
right? A lot of times what we say in our household is we call it down pushing. We came up with this phrase when the kids were really little, like, don't down push anybody, which basically means like, don't, don't like lift everybody up, right? Encourage
Yes.
people in what God's, stir them up to be able to go and do the things that God's called you to do. Because
Yes.
that's what I feel that's what our journey is all about. It's not, as believers, it's not going to be perfect, or it's not always amazing, but it is a journey. And as we go through that, how often do we need like that strength of the Lord to be able to carry us through when things get hard and they don't really work out the way that we expect that they're gonna.
Well, in case you want to know the verse that we were just referencing and talking about, that's on a picture right behind Anita in her office, it's Joshua 1:9, and
That's
it
right.
says, "Be strong and courageous, do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go."
Yeah.
So I love that. I've actually been in the book of Joshua for the last 24 days and just finished it this morning. And so I have all things Joshua conquering, Jordan crossing, promised land on my mind. And you talked so much of that today. So, ladies and gentlemen who might be listening, if you're looking for a good book of the Bible to actually see some of this personified and even come up against some conflict and some foot dragging and some great leadership and some bad leadership and some obedience and disobedience. It's all
Yeah.
in the book of Joshua. It's a great one for some of these themes. And I've just been reading it the last few weeks myself. So that's my unsolicited Bible reading advice for those of you that are loving some of this talk and some of these themes for your own life right now. So, Anita, thank you so much for just sharing your passion. I kept thinking along the way as you were talking that you seem like a Sherpa instead of a sign. Like you're not a sign that's on the mountain along the way going head that way. You're like, let me go with you. Let me show you how to get to base camp. Let me show you how to get to the next peak. Let me show you, and I'll go with you. And so,
Yep.
anyway, I hope that encourages you because it seems like your calling, at least in part, is to journey with other women who,
Yeah.
who are on their way to following the Lord. And what an incredible blessing. So, um, tell us where to find you. I love your full name, Anita Anello, right? How could you not? It sounds like, yes, I want to know Anita Anello. Why wouldn't you? So tell us where to find you. And if you're especially interested in the 6-step process that Anita has crafted, I'm sure she's going to tell you right now how you can get a hold of her. But I just really want to thank you for encouraging women out there that do have God-given ideas to bring those out in not just big dream possibilities, but also in like the practical reality of our messy everyday life. It is still possible. Doesn't matter where you're starting from. You can move toward that. And so I just I love your voice and your encouragement, and of course your practical wisdom. So tell us where to reach you.
You bet. You bet. So you can go to anitaanello.com, and my last name is Anello. I'll also provide Allie with a link so that you can get a free copy of the 6-step blueprint to be able to walk through the process to build your own profitable business. If you want some help along the way, you can find information on that as my website as well. So my formal company name is The Ripple Effect, an effect with an A like a verb, because I believe as wives and moms that wherever we go, we make a ripple effect. So you can also find us at therippleeffect.net. And you can get a copy of the 6-step blueprint there as well. So, Allie, I just want to thank you so much. I just pray a special blessing over you and your audience and what you're doing. I really want to encourage you. Keep going. You are making a difference in the lives of more people than you could ever imagine. And it's just amazing to see what you're doing. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And gosh, I just resonate with a lot of your story and your voice and your encouragement for other women. So hopefully you guys go find Anita. And man, I have something like percolating in the back of my mind too. I'm like, I think I might go download that guide myself. You never know what God will do. Sometimes we end up interviewing the very people we need. So
Yeah, that's great.
thank you for being on the podcast today. Really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.